In the harsh Nevada wilderness, an abandoned Mustang lay dying. Everyone expected nature to take its course. But when an aging gray wolf approached the dying horse, something extraordinary happened. This remarkable encounter between predator and prey will challenge your understanding of compassion and survival, revealing how life's most powerful connections can emerge in the most desperate moments. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly under the merciless summer sun. Among the sparse sagebrush and rocky terrain of the Ruby Mountains, a 3-week-old chestnut Mustang Foal lay collapsed on his side, his breaths coming in shallow gasps. Spirit, as he would later be named, had been separated from his herd during a sudden summer thunderstorm that sent the wild horses scattering across the range, too young to keep pace. The foal had veered in the wrong direction, ending up miles from his mother and the protection of the herd. For 2 days, the young Mustang had wandered, his small body quickly becoming dehydrated in the baking heat. His legs, still gangly with youth, finally gave out beneath him in a small depression near a dried-up creek bed. The foal's chestnut coat, once gleaming with health, was now dull and caked with dust. His eyes, glazed with exhaustion and fear, stared unseeing at the vast blue sky. Each breath seemed more labored than the last, his small rib cage rising and falling with diminishing strength. A quarter-mile away, from the shadow of a rocky outcropping, a pair of amber eyes watched. Shadow, an aging gray wolf with a battle-scarred face and grizzled muzzle, had been tracking the foal's scent since dawn. At 12 years old, the wolf was ancient by wild standards. Once the alpha of a thriving pack, Shadow now lived alone, forced out by younger, stronger males. The old wolf's hunting days were largely behind him. His joints ached with arthritis, and one of his canine teeth was cracked, making clean kills increasingly difficult. He had recently survived on smaller prey and carrion. The dying foal represented an opportunity for an easy meal. Shadow crept closer, his movements calculated and silent despite his age. The instincts of a lifetime told him to wait until the foal's breathing stopped completely. But something else, something unexpected, made him pause 20 yards from the collapsed horse. The wind shifted, bringing with it new scents, coyotes approaching from the south and something else, something human. Shadow froze, his ears pricked forward, torn between the promise of food and the threat of danger. The foal suddenly lifted his head slightly, perhaps sensing the predator's presence. Their eyes met across the dusty space between them, the dying innocence of prey and the ancient wisdom of a predator. In that moment, something passed between them, something that transcended the natural order. Shadow took another step forward, and his decision was made. But what would the old wolf do next? Was this to be the foal's end? Or would fate intervene in this desolate corner of the wilderness? As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert floor, two solitary lives hung in the balance. Shadow crept forward, his gray muzzle low to the ground, amber eyes fixed on the foal. Every instinct, honed through generations of evolution, told him this was prey vulnerable, dying. An easy meal in a harsh landscape where food was scarce. Yet something gave the old wolf pause. As Shadow drew closer, the foal made a feeble attempt to rise, managing only to lift his head a few inches before collapsing again. The small movement sent dust spiraling upward in the golden afternoon light. The wolf stopped, watching, his scarred head tilting slightly in curiosity. 10 miles away, Jessica Harmon steered her battered pickup truck along a rutted dirt road. At 32, Jessica had spent the last decade working as a wildlife biologist, specializing in the wild horse populations of Nevada. Recently, she'd begun a research project tracking the movements of the Ruby Mountain herd. And today she'd received reports of a separated foal. "We're probably too late, Mark," she said to her colleague, who sat in the passenger seat, scanning the horizon with binoculars. "If the herd scattered during that storm 2 days ago, a foal on its own wouldn't last long out here." Mark nodded grimly. "Still, we have to try. The satellite tracker shows the main herd about 15 miles north of here now. If we find it alive, we could try to reunite them." Jessica didn't respond, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the steering wheel. She'd seen too many orphaned foals perish in these mountains to be optimistic, but she couldn't bring herself to give up without trying. Back at the dried creek bed, Shadow had closed the distance to the foal. He stood just 5 feet away now, nostrils flaring as he took in the scent of the dying Mustang. The foal's eyes, once bright with the promise of life, now reflected only fear and resignation. Shadow had seen death many times as a pack leader. He had brought it to countless prey animals over the years. But now, in his solitude and old age, something had changed within him. Perhaps it was the wisdom that comes with surviving so long in an unforgiving world. Or perhaps it was simply that his hunger wasn't desperate enough to overcome his curiosity. The wolf circled the foal slowly, examining it from all sides. The young horse's breathing had grown more labored, his small body trembling with dehydration and exhaustion. Shadow recognized the signs this was not a quick death coming, but a slow, painful fading. In a surprising move, the wolf lay down several feet from the foal. Resting his grizzled head on his paw, he would wait. Whether he was waiting for the foal to die or for something else entirely, perhaps even Shadow himself didn't know. As the afternoon waned, the foal's condition deteriorated further. His eyes began to close, consciousness slipping away. It was then that Shadow did something extraordinary. He rose and approached the dying horse, gently nudging the foal's neck with his muzzle. When there was no response, the wolf looked toward a small depression nearby, where, remarkably, a tiny pool of water remained from the recent storm. Shadow looked back at the foal, then at the water, a conflict evident in his ancient eyes. Miles away, Jessica's truck bounced over a particularly rough stretch of terrain. "I think I see something up ahead," Mark said suddenly, pointing to a rocky outcropping in the distance, over by that dried creek bed. What neither Jessica nor Mark could yet see was that, in the fading light of day, an old predator was making a decision that would defy everything they understood about the natural world. As dusk painted the desert in hues of purple and gold, Shadow made a decision that defied his predatory nature. Instead of waiting for the foal to die, the old wolf moved toward the small depression where rainwater had collected. He dipped his muzzle into the precious liquid, then turned back toward the collapsed foal. With water dripping from his fur, Shadow approached the Mustang and did something remarkable. He began licking the foal's dry muzzle, transferring moisture to the parched lips of the dying horse. The action was deliberate, almost methodical, as if the ancient predator understood exactly what the young prey animal needed most. The foal's eyelids fluttered at the sensation of moisture. His tongue, swollen with dehydration, made a weak attempt to lick his lips. Encouraged by this response, Shadow repeated his actions, traveling back and forth between the water pool and the foal several times. On his third trip, the wolf attempted something even more astonishing. He tugged gently at the foal's mane, pulling with just enough pressure to communicate intent without causing pain. After several failed attempts to rouse the Mustang, Shadow lay down beside the foal, pressing his warm body against the horse's side, sharing body heat as the desert night began to cool rapidly. Jessica and Mark had abandoned their truck a half-mile back where the terrain became too rough for driving. They continued on foot, following the dried creek bed as the light faded. "We should have brought the portable floodlights," Mark muttered, switching on his flashlight. "We're losing daylight fast." Jessica didn't respond immediately, her attention caught by movement ahead, something gray against the darkening landscape. "Mark," she whispered, gripping his arm. "Look, is that a wolf?" Mark raised his binoculars, adjusting the focus in the dim light. "I think so, and there's something else with it. Could be our foal, but they're not. The wolf isn't attacking it. That doesn't make sense," Jessica said, quickening her pace. "Unless the foal is already dead." But as they drew closer, moving carefully to avoid startling the wolf, what they witnessed made them both stop in their tracks. The old wolf was lying beside the foal, and as they watched, he stood, went to the small water pool, and returned to dampen the horse's muzzle again. "That's impossible," Mark breathed. "Wolves don't. I know what wolves do and don't do." Jessica cut him off, her voice barely above a whisper. "And this? This is something I've never seen documented anywhere. The wolf suddenly became aware of their presence, his head snapping up, amber eyes reflecting the beam of Mark's flashlight. Instead of fleeing immediately, as most wolves would, Shadow stood his ground, positioning himself between the humans and the foal. He's protecting it, Jessica said in disbelief. For a long moment, the three wolf woman and man remained frozen in a tableau that challenged everything Jessica thought she knew about wildlife behavior. Shadow gave a low growl, not aggressive but warning. Jessica slowly reached for her canteen. Mark, I'm going to try something. Don't move. Jess, that's a wild wolf. Don't. But Jessica had already taken a slow step forward. She unscrewed her canteen and poured some water into a small collapsible bowl she carried for field research. Moving with deliberate slowness, she placed the bowl on the ground and backed away. The wolf watched, muscles tense, ready to flee or fight. When Jessica and Mark had retreated several steps, Shadow approached the bowl cautiously, sniffed it, then looked back at the foal. What happened next would change the course of all their lives. The old wolf, instead of drinking himself, picked up the bowl carefully in his jaws and carried it to the dying foal. As night fell completely over the Nevada desert, the stars emerged to witness an alliance that transcended the ancient boundaries between predator, prey, and human. But would this fragile connection be enough to save the foal's life? The desert night grew cold as Jessica and Mark set up a temporary camp 20 yards from where the foal lay with his unlikely guardian. They worked quietly, erecting a small tent and unpacking emergency supplies, their movements careful and deliberate to avoid startling the wolf. I've radioed for the mobile vet unit, Mark whispered, returning from a call on their satellite phone. They can be here by morning with for fluids and proper medical equipment. But honestly, Jess, I don't think the foal will make it through the night. Jessica nodded grimly as she filled another shallow bowl with water and added electrolytes from her field kit. The foal's condition was critical: severe dehydration, possible organ failure, and the desert's extreme temperature fluctuations all working against his survival. What about the wolf? Mark asked. Clark won't be happy if we tell him we're trying to save a foal with a wild predator standing guard. Clark isn't here, Jessica replied firmly, and I'm not chasing that wolf away. Not after what we've seen. She approached slowly, bowl in hand, and set it down several feet from where Shadow lay beside the foal. The old wolf's eyes tracked her every movement, but he made no aggressive gesture. Jessica noted his appearance in the beam of her flashlight: the graying muzzle, scarred face, and slight limp as he rose to investigate the offering. He's ancient, she murmured as she backed away. Probably can't hunt effectively anymore. That might explain his behavior. He's adapted. Mark looked skeptical. Wolves don't just stop being wolves, Jess. This goes against everything we know about predator behavior. Shadow picked up the bowl in his jaws and carried it to the foal, spilling only a little as he set it down near the Mustang's muzzle. With gentle nudges, he encouraged the foal to drink. The young horse, revived somewhat by the wolf's earlier ministrations, managed a few weak sips. As the night deepened, Jessica and Mark took turns watching the strange pair. Round midnight, a new threat emerged: the distinctive yipping howls of coyotes echoed across the desert, growing closer by the minute. A pack of 4, maybe 5, Mark estimated, reaching for the rifle they carried for protection. Shadow heard them too. His ears pricked forward as he rose stiffly to his feet. The foal, sensing danger, tried unsuccessfully to stand, managing only to lift his head a few inches. Jessica watched as the wolf positioned himself between the approaching coyotes and the vulnerable foal. Shadow's posture changed, his hackles rose, and despite his age and infirmity, he suddenly looked formidable. He's going to defend it, Jessica said in disbelief. One old wolf against a pack of coyotes. The coyotes appeared at the ridge above the dried creek bed, their eyes gleaming in the darkness. Shadow gave a deep, rumbling growl that Jessica felt in her chest more than heard. The lead coyote hesitated, perhaps recognizing the threat in the old wolf's stance despite its obvious disadvantage. We need to help him, Jessica said, grabbing a flashlight and her hiking stick. Make some noise. Mark followed her lead, and together they shouted and banged equipment, creating a cacophony that echoed through the night. The coyotes, caught between a defensive wolf and noisy humans, retreated after a tense standoff. As silence returned to the desert, Shadow remained vigilant for nearly an hour before finally settling back beside the foal. Jessica noticed that. He positioned himself on the side facing the direction from which the coyotes had come to liberate protection. She whispered to Mark as they retreated to their tent, "I'm documenting everything. This could revolutionize what we understand about interspecies relationships." By dawn, Jessica was awakened by the sound of a helicopter. The mobile veterinary unit had arrived sooner than expected, descending into a clear area half a mile away. As daylight spread across the desert, she went to check on the foal. To her amazement, the young Mustang was still alive, his breathing slightly stronger than the night before. Shadow sat nearby, alert but exhausted, his sides heaving with each breath. When the wolf saw Jessica, he rose shakily to his feet, swaying slightly. "He's been awake all night," Jessica realized aloud, standing guard. The sound of approaching vehicles made Shadow's ears twitch. He looked at Jessica, then at the foal, then back at the human. Something in the wolf's ancient eyes seemed to convey a message, a passing of responsibility. With one last glance at the foal, Shadow limped away toward the rocky outcroppings, his mission apparently complete. Jessica watched him go, understanding dawning in her heart. The old wolf had done all he could. Now it was up to humans to continue what he had started. Jessica stood back as Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead veterinarian, worked quickly to assess the foal's condition. For lines delivered vital fluids while monitors beeped steadily, creating a surreal juxtaposition of modern medicine against the ancient desert backdrop. "Remarkably, he's still alive," Dr. Rodriguez said, her experienced hands moving efficiently as she checked the foal's vital signs. Severe dehydration, malnourishment, and exposure to the elements. He should have died days ago. Jessica glanced toward the rocky outcropping where Shadow had disappeared. "He had help." Dr. Rodriguez looked up skeptically. "From a wolf, Mark told me, but I find it difficult to believe. I recorded some of it," Jessica replied, pulling out her camera. "See for yourself." As the veterinary team continued working on the foal, Jessica showed Dr. Rodriguez the footage she had captured during the night. Shadow bringing water, lying protectively beside the foal, and facing down coyotes. The video was grainy in the low light, but undeniable. "This contradicts everything we know about natural predator-prey dynamics," Dr. Rodriguez murmured, her scientific mind struggling to reconcile what she was seeing. "Have you shared this with anyone else?" "Not yet," Jessica replied. "I wanted to understand it better first." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion among the team. The foal had begun to show signs of distress, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "His temperature is dropping," one of the technicians called out. "We're losing him." Dr. Rodriguez rushed back to the foal, barking orders to her team. "Warm fluids, now, and get the thermal blankets from the chopper." Jessica stood helplessly as they fought to stabilize the young Mustang. She found herself scanning the horizon, irrationally hoping to see the gray form of Shadow returning, as if the old wolf could somehow help where modern medicine was failing. In that moment of desperation, Jessica made a decision. She approached Dr. Rodriguez. "The wolf's scent," she said urgently. "The foal associates it with safety now. Can we try something unconventional?" The veterinarian looked skeptical but nodded. "At this point, I'm open to suggestions." Jessica jogged quickly to the spot where Shadow had lain beside the foal through the night. Using a clean bandana, she gathered dirt and fur from the impression left by the wolf's body. Returning to the foal, she gently placed the scented cloth near his nostrils. The effect was subtle but immediate. The foal's breathing slowed slightly, and his muscles, which had been tense with stress, visibly relaxed. "Well, I'll be damned," Dr. Rodriguez murmured. "Keep that there." Throughout the morning, the team worked tirelessly. By noon, the foal had stabilized enough to be transported. They carefully loaded him into a specially designed sling and carried him to the waiting helicopter. "We'll take him to the Wild Horse Recovery Center in Carson City," Dr. Rodriguez told Jessica. He'll have round-the-clock care there. Jessica nodded, her gaze drawn again to the rocky outcroppings. I'd like to come, but there's something I need to do first. After the helicopter departed with Mark accompanying the foal, Jessica grabbed her backpack and tracking equipment. Something compelled her to find Shadow concern for his well-being, scientific curiosity, or perhaps something deeper she couldn't yet articulate. Following faint paw prints in the dust, Jessica tracked the wolf to a small cave in the rocks. She approached cautiously, calling softly, "Shadow, are you in there, old man?" A low whine answered her. Jessica peered into the darkness to see the wolf lying on its side. Breathing heavily, his eyes, when they met hers, held recognition but also resignation. The night's exertions had taken their toll on his aging body. Jessica settled at the cave entrance, keeping a respectful distance. "You did something impossible," she told him softly. "You saved that foal when everything in your nature should have told you to take advantage of an easy meal." "Why?" Shadow watched her with those ancient amber eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of millennia. Of course, he couldn't answer, but as Jessica sat with him through the afternoon, she began to form theories. Perhaps it was his age, no longer driven by the urgent hungers of youth. Perhaps it was his solitude, separated from his pack and seeking some form of connection. Or perhaps it was something deeper, something that transcended species, a recognition of suffering and a choice to alleviate it, rather than exploit it. As evening approached, Jessica made another difficult decision. She called Dr. Rodriguez. "Elena, I need another favor. There's an elderly wolf here, the one who helped the foal. He's in poor condition. I think he may be dying." 3 weeks later, Jessica stood at the viewing window of the rehabilitation facility, watching as the chestnut foal, now named Spirit, eagerly gulped down his morning meal. His transformation was remarkable. Once on death's doorstep, he now pranced around his enclosure with the boundless energy of youth restored. "His blood work came back normal this morning," Dr. Rodriguez said, joining Jessica at the window. "No lasting kidney damage from the dehydration, which is honestly miraculous. I think we can start planning his reintroduction to the wild herd next month." Jessica nodded absently, her thoughts elsewhere. "And Shadow?" Dr. Rodriguez's expression softened. "Come see for yourself." They walked through the facility to a separate section designed for predator rehabilitation. Unlike the other enclosures that housed wolves injured by vehicles or human encounters, Shadow's space was unique, larger, with a raised platform that overlooked an adjacent paddock. The old wolf was dozing in the morning sun when they approached. His condition, like Spirit's, had improved dramatically. Proper nutrition, medication for his arthritis, and dental work to repair his broken canine had restored some of his former vitality. Though nothing could reverse his advanced age. "He spends hours up there," Dr. Rodriguez noted, pointing to the platform. "At first, we couldn't figure out why he was so fixated on that spot." Jessica smiled. "It overlooks Spirit's exercise paddock, doesn't it?" "Exactly. When we move the foal outside each afternoon, Shadow watches him like a helicopter parent." The staff started coordinating their schedules so the two could have visual contact daily. As if on cue, Shadow's ears perked up at the sound of their voices. He rose stiffly and approached the fence, his amber eyes finding Jessica immediately. "Hello, old friend," she greeted him, kneeling to be at eye level. "Looking better," Shadow whined softly, pressing his nose against the fence that separated them. Jessica had visited regularly over the past weeks, and the wolf had grown to recognize and even anticipate her presence. "The board meets tomorrow to decide their futures," Dr. Rodriguez said quietly. "Spirit's path is relatively clear: recovery, then reintroduction. But Shadow," she let the thought hang unfinished. They both knew the complications surrounding the elderly wolf, too habituated to humans now for release, but unlike other permanent residents who had been raised in captivity, Shadow had known a lifetime of freedom. "I've been thinking about that," Jessica said slowly. "What if there was a third option? Something that honors both his wild nature and the extraordinary connection he formed with Spirit?" Later that afternoon, Jessica presented her proposal to the facility's board of directors, a diverse group of wildlife experts, veterinarians, and conservation advocates. What we witnessed in the desert wasn't just an anomaly, she explained, showing them her documentation and research. It was an example of interspecies empathy that challenges our fundamental understanding of wildlife behavior, she outlined. Her plan a special sanctuary where both shadow and spirit could live out their lives. Not fully wild but not traditionally captive either. A place where their unique bond could be maintained while also serving as an educational opportunity. The public is already invested in their story, Jessica continued. The footage I captured has gone viral, with over 10 million views. People are calling it a modern-day fable, the wolf who saved a horse instead of hunting it. After hours of deliberation, the board approved a modified version of Jessica's sanctuary proposal on a provisional basis. It wasn't everything she'd hoped for, but it was a start. As the meeting concluded, Jessica walked quickly to the predator rehabilitation area. She found Shadow at his favorite spot on the platform, gazing out at the darkened paddock where Spirit would return tomorrow. "We did it, old man," she told him softly. "It's not perfect, but it's a chance." Shadow turned to look at her, his ancient eyes reflecting the soft security lights. In that moment, Jessica felt the weight of her promise to him to honor the extraordinary choice he had made and ensure that his remaining time would hold meaning and dignity. 6 months later, the sanctuary had transformed from concept to reality. Nestled in a protected valley 30 miles from Carson City, Wild Crossroads Sanctuary occupied 50 acres of diverse terrain, open meadows, wooded areas, and rocky outcroppings that mimicked the natural landscape of Nevada. Jessica stood on the observation deck, clipboard in hand, making notes as she watched the extraordinary scene unfolding below. In the central meadow, Spirit, now a healthy yearling with a gleaming chestnut coat, grazed peacefully alongside 2 other rehabilitated Mustangs who had been deemed unsuitable for wild release, and there, resting in the shade of a juniper tree, just 20 yards away, lay Shadow. The old wolf had his own pack now, 3 other wolves with similar stories of human intervention and impossible returns to the wild. But Shadow remained unique among them, frequently separating from his canine companions to simply watch Spirit from afar, still maintaining their distance. "They're not friends in the way humans understand friendship," Jessica explained to Dr. Rodriguez, who had joined her on the deck. "They don't play together or seek physical affection from each other, but there's this awareness, this connection." Shadow still sees himself as Spirit's protector. That evening, during a fundraising gala for the sanctuary, Jessica was called away by an emergency alert. Horse thieves had targeted the sanctuary, and both Spirit and Shadow were missing. Search teams spread out across the property and into the surrounding wilderness. 2 hours later, they found an abandoned horse trailer 3 miles from the sanctuary. Wolf prints circled the trailer, and signs of a struggle were evident in the disturbed earth. Following the tracks, they found them in a small ravine. Spirit standing alert but calm, and Shadow lying on his side nearby, wounded but alive. The old wolf had somehow escaped his secure enclosure after hearing the young horse's distress, tracked him for miles, and confronted the thieves to protect him once again. As Shadow recovered from his injury, their story captured international attention, inspiring new research into interspecies relationships and animal emotional intelligence. The expanded sanctuary, renamed Shadow's Legacy Wildlife Center, received international funding and recognition. 2 months later, on a perfect spring morning, Jessica watched from her office window as Shadow took his daily walk through a special, interconnected enclosure that had been built following the incident. On the other side of a special reinforced glass partition, Spirit trotted alongside, matching his pace to the elderly wolf's. "We humans like to think we're the only species capable of compassion. That overrides instinct," Jessica said during the center's dedication ceremony. "Shadow taught us otherwise. He showed us that the capacity for connection exists throughout the natural world, often in places we never thought to look." The story of Shadow and Spirit reminds us that compassion can emerge in the most unexpected places, defying nature itself. Sometimes, the most powerful connections are formed in our darkest moments. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. We share inspiring animal stories every week that will change how you See the world. Leave a comment below sharing what moved you most, and help us reach even more animal lovers by sharing this video with someone who needs to hear it today.